Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Time Under Tension. We are in our series on behavior change, and today yours truly will be opening up about how I've progressed through the stages of behavior change and continue to kind of refer to the process that we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks to instill and sustain that change long term. So if you have not yet, please pause this video. Go back to the last 2 weeks. The first week, we introduced behavior change in general, the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. And last week, Dee walked us through how she's applied that model to her own life in overcoming her patterns of disordered eating. And we had some really great tangible examples of how to put that into practice. So definitely want to intro those before you get into this video. Before we get rolling, there is an opportunity to get $20 off Buzzsprout, which is the podcasting platform that we use. It's super easy. I had no idea how to do this before, but starting a podcast was something I've always wanted to do. So if you are interested in starting a podcast, this is your call to action today. Just do it. Do it today, right after this episode. Perfect on behavior change. And there's a link in the show notes that'll give you $20 off, and it'll give us a little bit of credit to support the channel. So now that I've given the introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Dee, who is going to interview me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think off the record, what we were talking about before this, I want to bring it into this actual setting of us recording because you made a great point. Last week, when I was talking about my behavior change, it was a much broader, big, overall, an eating disorder is much bigger on the scale of behavior change in terms of its focus. And today, when we're hopping into what you're going to discuss, it's a little bit more focused on a very specific action, but has led to you really being able to show up as your best self as you've worked through that cycle of behavior change. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to ask you a couple of questions about that change that you've endured, but also just to be able to point out that behavior change doesn't always just happen with the big problems in our life. It can show up in these very minor adjustments to what we're doing and these actions that we're taking. But in the grand scheme of things, those little things end up being huge things in the overall outcome of being able to show up as our best self. So I think it's cool that we're both going to give a little bit of an example that brings in all different kinds of potential problems that one is facing with or struggling with in the present moment. So why don't you go ahead and introduce just a little bit of what it is, the behavior that you want to discuss, and a little bit more about your personal journey with it.
Yeah, definitely. And just running off that real quick, I think that those little things are the things that actually comprise our lives. We think about these big events in our lives, big decisions, but we're making hundreds, if not thousands, of little decisions every single day. And those are the ones that are really driving our lives. And I would say that those little decisions are the opportunities that we have to build a sense of self-confidence by demonstrating competence. And we should leverage those little decisions more so that we can build that confidence so that when we get to those times in our life that are more of like a fork in the road moment, or hey, I have to work through something that's much more deeply rooted or much more substantial of an issue in my life, I have developed the confidence I needed by showing up in these other little areas of my life. So for myself, something that I struggle with for a really long time is kind of this combo, I would say addictive tendency towards caffeine and specifically energy drinks. And I'm not demonizing energy drinks. I do not even tell my clients you're not allowed to have energy drinks. I think that there's a time and a place. Everything is permissible. Not everything is beneficial. So if you can use things in moderation, that's fine. But if you're doing something and you feel inside that it's conflicting with what you know you should be doing, I think that that's what matters, and I think it's really important to follow that sense of conscience. And when you don't, you start to become very internally dissonant. And my battle with caffeine and knowing I needed to stop drinking energy drinks had a lot of other impacts in my life and it made me feel like I was living out of my integrity, and that is something that felt very heavy to me.
Can you start just a little bit with the pre-contemplation stage and what your life was like when you were having energy drinks, how regularly you were having them? Just talk a little bit about what your life was like before, and then maybe also in that same explanation, tie in a little bit of that contemplation stage where you did come to the realization that this was something that was causing disruption for you. What was the thing that caused you to come to the contemplation stage, but also at what point, I guess, what did your life look like before you reached that as well? Just so everybody kind of knows what you came from and what this decision for you to change your action really looked like.
Definitely. So I'm just gonna pull this up so you guys can look at this if you're watching this. I think again, I'm super visual, so having these stages to look at is helpful. So pre-contemplation is that period before we're like aware of the problem. And I think for me, part of it was I was in an environment, two different environments in which this behavior or like just the general tendency to overconsume caffeine and energy drinks was very normalized. And so it was slightly out of my awareness that it was a problem because there was a part of me that was definitely justifying it, feeling like, "Oh, well, I mean, like, literally everyone around me is drinking caffeine all the time." And this was in nursing, especially as a night shift nurse. Believe it or not, nurses have, like, very poor habits pretty consistently. Unfortunately, I feel like that's just the effects of not putting yourself first and taking care of other people. And in bodybuilding, which stimulants are used a lot, and they're very heavily dependent on, especially in a prep scenario, and they're often used in bodybuilding, but also as a pattern with disordered eating to help curb hunger. And so it was kind of like normalized in those areas. And there was definitely a time where I wasn't fully aware that it was a problem. And I felt like I could justify it because of the behaviors of those around me. So raising awareness, it's strange because I feel like there's a lot of different things in my life where I think, "Oh, I feel suddenly convicted that I need to change this behavior." And then I'll go back and look at an old journal or even like an old check-in log with a previous coach, and I'm literally saying the same thing I said 2 years ago, or when I told my ex-husband that I was quitting energy drinks, he was like, all right, good luck. Like, not in a discouraging way, but like he's been there at least 4 other times when I've tried to do this. And so it's like, oh, God, this is the same thing over and over. Like, I think I'm like suddenly convicted, like I need to stop. But even before I would have said I was super aware, there have been multiple times in my life where I have felt convicted to stop drinking them. And I don't think it was until super recently that the conviction grew so strong that I actually moved into like a true contemplation stage, or at least previously I had switched myself back into pre-contemplation where I kind of just like suppressed the awareness and found a way to justify it enough that I didn't really perceive it as an issue.
Yeah, so let me ask a question for you right there. Is what was your focal point and why did it take you from contemplation back to pre-contemplation? What changed this time around? Did the focus change for you? Was there another aspect of your life that helped you to create a different kind of connection with what energy drinks might be causing you? Or what was it this time that was different than the past times for you?
That is a really great question, and I think that's a key in behavior change, so I'm glad you asked that. Okay, so in the past, I've I have dealt with, really worked to overcome anorexia. But with that, I've had a lot of tendencies towards orthorexia. And you may not have heard of that, but for those of you who haven't, it's like you are really obsessed with like clean eating. Like your food sources need to be pure. Sometimes that's like an extreme diet like veganism, or it could be like I don't eat any kind of chemicals or anything that's quote processed at all. It's like this hyper cleanliness around your intake. So in the past, there's been more of this like guilt, like energy drinks are like toxic and they have a bunch of chemicals in them and I shouldn't be drinking them. Like I know they're bad, but like it was still very vague and it was very guilt driven. And I just kind of felt guilty being like, I'm a health coach and I believe in eating organic and I only buy free range meat. And then I was like drinking monsters like 3 times a day. So it felt like icky inside. And I would, in the past, like cycle through different types of diets. So a lot of the times it would be in some kind of new diet where I would decide to cut them out. So like when I went carnivore, that's like a very strict diet. And even when I went keto, because monsters have like, depending on which one, like 6 grams of carbs, I was like, well, I can't have 6 grams of carbs from Monster. So I had to have like a diet adherence before I would even think about cutting them out in the past. And that just wasn't a strong enough driver because it was more like a should than a deeply ingrained like this is my why. This is my like
Mhm.
conscience driving me. It was more like, oh well, I can't really tell people that I'm keto if I'm drinking a monster. I can't really tell people I'm pure carnivore if I'm drinking these like chemically laden bangs. So I think this time the difference was kind of twofold. So there was, I think, one of the deeper reasons. More lately in the last year, I've realized it really doesn't matter what anyone thinks about my life, like to be completely honest, but it really does matter that I'm living in integrity. And so if I'm telling clients, hey, you're having gut issues, we got to pull out energy drinks. It's not about guilt or shoulds or, yes, some people can have them and be fine, but guess what? You can't. You have really slow digestion or your acid reflux is really bad and it's just not a good fit for you. Like it's not about, well, so and so or this coach said or other athlete. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. It's about what works for you and what doesn't. And this time I was really diving into my digestive health has been so poor over the past few years and especially in the past couple months that I was like, what am I doing spending $150 a month on supplementation for my digestive health when I'm literally drinking Alani News once or twice a day? Like, and I have
Mhm.
acid reflux and I know it triggers it and it affects the digestion of the next meal that I have. Like, it felt it was like I was blocking it off in my brain that this thing could be very clearly contributing to my issues. So I think it was just like this inner sense of like, what you're doing doesn't make any sense. And if you're going to sit here and teach people how to fix their digestive health, you have to do that out of a sense of integrity. And that resonates much more deeply with my sense of why and my purpose and the values out of which I'm living than like, I need to follow this diet.
Yeah, and I love that so much because you said that, right? In your what actually allowed you to change was realizing your why. And I think one of the biggest things that people can hear in that is when we put our motivation and our commitment in other people's opinions or in something that's outside of ourselves, it's not consistent. It doesn't stay. We can say, well, F that, screw that, whatever. I'm just gonna do it, doesn't matter. Like we can start to change our actual inner state when we understand that there's something internally that we are needing that isn't being met. And this pattern is one of the biggest reasons why I'm feeling out of alignment. And I love that. I just think that was such a cool point that you pointed out. And I think a follow up question I want to ask you a little bit more specifically is you talked about environment being big and just the normalization of things in your environment. And when I know on here it says determination, and I kind of like that, but I think it's usually preparation when we're talking about it. In that next step that that you took before in understanding you were living out of alignment with your digestive um, focus as well as your acid reflux, was there a different way you prepared this time as well? And what was it that caused a little bit of fear for you in actually taking the action steps moving forward?
Definitely. Okay, so this stage I would say is my probably one of my most loaded stages in terms of all the things that needed to happen here. So it's great to feel convicted. And you need to have something driving you. You can't just be like, I'm gonna change this behavior, but I don't really know why I'm gonna change it. Like you have to have a why, but then that determination is like, all right, what strategies do I need to take? So the timeline of this was it was December, and I was like, all right, I gotta cut them out. Like I really just need to get over it and cut them out and stop. So I had gone to Publix the day before and bought three energy drinks, and I still had two of them in my car because I was getting into like drinking them twice a day. So I was keeping them in my car so that I wouldn't drink them twice a day. But then I was finding myself walking to my car to go get the second one. I was like, well, at least I'm getting some steps in. Like, oh my God, the things we do to justify behavior. So so I was like, all right, Olivia, you know what you need to do. Like, you need to go throw those away. And you hate wasting money and you hate throwing things away. So this is going to be it. This is going to be your way to tell yourself that you're serious this time. So I went to my car and I literally recorded a video of me throwing these full Alani news into the dumpster because I was like, today's the day I changed my life. Like, I was so excited. Like, that was my preparation of like, all right, I'm determined now. I took this massive action to throw these things away and I took a video. So I can't forget. I'm going to go back and watch this like every time I think about having them. And then was so grateful. We went to Florida and I was like, great. I'm out of my environment. So now for the next however many days, 1 week or so, I won't even have energy drinks. And that'll be great because the habit will be broken. And when I get home, like I won't even be thinking about them anymore because I won't have had them. So that was fine, except except stress. Yes. When I travel, I get stressed. So when I got home, I like wanted to offload stress. And the way that I do that, whether it's, probably a little counterproductive, is by having energy drinks. So I don't even know what happened. I just literally found myself in the car. I was like, oh, well, I won't have an Alani New. I'll have a Monster because that's 50 milligrams less of caffeine. Again, the justification. So I found myself driving to the gas station and I'm just like blaring an audiobook. So I'm not like thinking about what I'm doing. And I get home and I have like horrible acid reflux after this Monster. And I'm just like, well, clearly I'm never going to be able to quit this. And then I felt bad because I had told you, and that was another step I took. Well, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to quit energy drinks. And now I'm like, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to hide them from Dee because I told her I was going to quit drinking them? So I was just really frustrated. And I heard something that I was listening to some podcast and it said, stop trying to change the behaviors that you don't like, which I know might sound contradictory to what we've been talking about. But it said, just sit with them and watch yourself do these things that you really don't like. Just let yourself and watch yourself and kind of let that dissonance fester. And I just got to a point where I was like, I'm really freaking fed up. But being fed up is not enough of a reason to keep me moving forward. So I need a new game plan. And I sat there and I talked it through with you. I'm like, look, I've tried this before. I threw them away. I told you. So I had an accountability partner. Like I committed to myself. I just don't have a big enough reason. I have a reason when I'm experiencing the symptoms. Like every night, I'm like, tomorrow I'll stop because I can't do this anymore. And then the next day, I'm like, I feel great. I can't wait to have an energy drink today and, put myself in the same situation again. I'm like, I don't have anything to hold on to when I get into those moments where the habit and the addiction is just so strong. There's no thought process that could like pull me back into the person that I want to be. Like, I can't think my way through this because it's so ingrained in my body. So I was like, I need a reward. Right now, I'm just telling myself you can't have this. You can't have this. And that just made me angry inside. There was a part of me that was like, forget that. I'm an adult. I can have what I want. And then I end up having like two in a day, the day that I'm like really committed. So I'm like, that is not enough. I need a reward. That would work for me if I knew like each day there was something in front of me. Just like with competing, I could put in the work every single day because I have this reward of like, yeah, this excellent execution, but like it's going to be so cool when I'm on that stage and I know I poured everything I had into every single day. But I don't really have that drive now that's going to keep me focused. So I did a couple things. I use a journal and I wrote out a contract with myself. And I like told myself like there are going to be times when you want to have an energy drink again. And this is why you're not going to. And trust me, it's going to be worth it. And you're going to be so proud of yourself. And when you sign on this line below, like you're committing to this. And there's a reward at the end, and it'll be better than you even imagine. You just have to stay committed to it. And I signed it. And it was like a contract between me, my higher self, and God. And I was like, this feels really heavy now. This is more than just like a internal, all right, I'm gonna do this. This is like, I'm not gonna like, it's like I would really be lying to myself, hurting myself. But I also told myself, if you can do this for 90 days, you can get you can schedule a tattoo appointment. So I like told myself, you get to do this thing. And that has been all I needed. It was crazy. It was like a switch flipped. And for the first time, I haven't really had issues with it. And there was one day where I went to Publix after not having been there since I quit. And just the smell of the store when I walked in, like immediately, like a picture of an Alani Nu came into my brain. And I was like, this says a lot about environment because I haven't thought about it really at all. Just hasn't even been on my radar. But just as a side note, if you're trying to change a behavior and you continue to put yourself in the environment that's just exacerbating that behavior, it's going to be really hard. You're just making it harder on yourself. So change your routine. And that's the last thing I would say is besides the contract with myself and besides having like a bigger reward that I could look forward to that was a little bit more like tangible and short term as opposed to like you'll have better digestion, which is super vague. It was like you get to set this tattoo appointment. I get to like check off the days on my calendar, which is very rewarding for like a type A to-do list person like me. Get to sit there and check it off every day. I had those two things going for me. And then I so then lastly I changed my morning routine and I added in writing. And what I didn't realize, although writing is its own goal, writing fulfilled the need that the energy drinks were also attempting to fulfill. And that was to go into my work feeling zoned in and focused. And I think that's something really important that you said is that everything that we do, like all of our behaviors, even when we feel like they're bad or they don't serve us, they are really trying to meet a need. So me turning to energy drinks wasn't just this like, I have no willpower and I have an addictive personality. Like it can't just end there. It's like maybe those things are true, but like I'm trying to meet a need. So like what do I actually need? And then what's a replacement behavior for that? 'Cause cutting it out isn't really honoring myself because I'm not doing anything proactively to meet that need that the energy drink was trying to meet. And I didn't know it, but it was to be focused and zoned in and a little bit energized going into my day. And somehow, thankfully, writing fulfilled that same need.
Yeah, I think that's something we've talked about a couple of times before is that when we are intaking something, it's because we have internally an emptiness that's not being filled. And you said again how important an environment is. And when we're normalized by constant coffee intake or caffeine intake in general, being the way in which we know how to focus and get clarity, like you're saying, it makes almost like logical sense to have caffeine before you enter into your work. But it took realizing that you're telling your clients one thing, and integrity is such a focal, if it's not your inner core, the way you live your life, you're telling your clients something and you're realizing you need that. So that needs to change for you, but you're still left without that need being met. And I think it's so important that I just re-emphasize again that you're saying to put something else in place, try something. Even if it doesn't happen like you, where you just change it to writing and it works, trying different things that you know get you into that flow state of work or focus and clarity and driven, just being driven in general. It's like, okay, caffeine, clearly my body is reacting to this and it's telling me that this is not the right answer. So no, instead of getting frustrated, getting fascinated, like we talked about last time, well, okay, so I still know what I need, but well, what else could fulfill that need for me? And you knowing yourself well enough to know that writing is something that really just integrates you so deeply into this flow state where you're feeling so energized, but that energy is coming from this new behavior of yours that is fueled from inside. All of a sudden now you're able to stay in that maintenance stage so much longer with the reward that you said. It's like so multi-dimensional. But when I love so much that you're just talking about, we can't just say we're going to stop something, because then we're shorting our need, which eventually is going to grow into this bigger and bigger need when we're not meeting it. And now we don't feel like we can even trust ourselves. Our body's like, well, I don't trust you because you're not even trying to take care of this need that I need met. That we almost create further dissonance and less connection to ourselves. So I just thought that was such an amazing point that you pointed out in your journey. And how, what day are you on now? Can you tell everybody what day you're on in your journey so far?
Well, January 7th was the first day, and today is February 5th. So I'm almost a month in, which is really exciting. And honestly, except for that one day when I went to Publix, like it just hasn't been an issue. And you said it was more of that fascination of being like, huh, that's crazy how quickly an
Yeah.
environment can trigger it. But that shows me like, man, just help put yourself in better environments, because like that is a step that you can take. Just like if you're an alcoholic, don't go to bars, man. I mean, maybe down the line, deep in your recovery process, if you're doing all the things and talking to your sponsor and all this stuff, like maybe you can go out to dinner with people who are drinking, or like be in a place that has a bar and be okay. But don't put yourself in situations like it's just not worth it. And you will not only lose that opportunity to build that self-confidence, but you will start to like degrade yourself, your concept of self. And that is like, it's painful. It is super painful.
Can you, just with that environment piece that you're talking about, can you speak to when you've been in a personal journey? I know you mentioned talking to Travis about quitting, and you mentioned talking to me about having an accountability buddy, but what have you done in your own personal journey with your, whoever it was you were living with, helping to create an environment that did help you meet your goals, and how you went about having that conversation? For example, I don't drink caffeine because of what it did to my body. And so that's not necessarily a barrier that we have to cross together. But there have been other instances where I and you both have had to come to each other saying, hey, I can't have this in the house, or hey, can we take the pre-workout out of the house? Things like that. Can
Yeah.
you just speak to how you go about talking to your partner at the time about encouraging you to help create that environment, especially knowing that you're going to spend most of your time here versus at a Publix, for example?
Definitely. I think that's a great point. And it can be a hard conversation, and I think it needs to be very tactful. I mean, hopefully this is in a foundation of good communication to begin with. But I think the pre-workout is a good example. Like that's another thing that I was really struggling with. I was like drinking it through the day. It's all kind of the same issue of that like hyper caffeination and just like the sweet drinks, which helped a lot with hunger. And it was an issue. And I had to ask you, like, hey, can you take all these pre-workouts that I have to work just so that they're not in my immediate environment? And like I really don't want you to even like offer to pick me up a Sprite Zero from the store. And but the conversation I learned it doesn't go well in general if you come at it like, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, don't you know that I'm trying to stop this and you're just making it hard? I think if you're going to talk to your significant other or whoever you're living with about stuff like this, being like, hey, I'm having a really hard time and I really want to do this on my own. I'm really stubborn. I'm very independent. I like want to have the strength and willpower to do this on my own, but I'm just having a hard time because it's in my environment, and that's a hard conversation to have. But what it does is it gives them an opportunity to show you love, which I think any well-meaning partner or friend or roommate will want that opportunity. If you say, hey, I think I need your help. Like, do you think that maybe we could just take this stuff out of the house right now? Or, if you decide to partake of this, if you're deciding to drink and say, I'm not wanting to, could maybe you not drink at home just to help me during this time? And I just really appreciate if you are willing to help me and just put it in their court like that. Like, I just need some help and not make it like you're making this hard for me, or even being like internally bitter at them for like bringing something to your environment without having a conversation about it.
Yeah, that's so good. I have just one final question for you, and I'm excited for you to speak on this piece in as much detail as you would like. I'm kind of going to put you on the spot here, but I think a lot of what you've spoken to me about in this journey with you cutting out caffeine has been your overall connectedness to your body and how much better you feel in terms of your ability to stay calm,
Mhm.
and not experience so much anxiety or anxiousness. And I'm curious if you have been able to tie those two things together fully, or if that has just been something you've noticed has also come as a pro to listening to your body's conviction about stopping caffeine. Speaking a little bit to that.
I think it's twofold. I think that when you are doing something that is contrary to what your conscience is calling you to do, you create a disconnect with your body because you're kind of like upholding a lie in a way. You're like kind of trying to hide it from the other part of yourself that's calling you out. Like, oh, well, it's not that bad. Like everyone's doing it, but like your conscience knows that you're not like it's not what you need. So there's that disconnect. And then for me with caffeine, it's hard because I love the feeling. I really do, but it definitely triggers my anxiety and the sense of like hyperactivity and inability to be still. And it's strange because like I have I have some clients who really struggle with anxiety and a lot of them take medication for it and that's great. If that's something that you need and you've talked to your doctor and have gone to therapy and stuff and that's in your protocol and that works well, awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. But I think it's really important to just be honest with yourself and just be like, what am I doing in my life that's just exacerbating my anxiety? Like, it's not your fault for having anxiety, but if you have a predisposition towards anxiety, you need to have some guardrails in place. You probably should not be drinking caffeine all day long. You probably should not be doing cocaine. Like, and that sounds dramatic, right? But caffeine is so normalized in our society. There's a Starbucks on every single corner, and people are chugging like these cold brews with like 500 mgs of caffeine in them all day long while they sit at a desk. And then they're like, my neck hurts. And I'm like, you're sitting at a desk like this all day with your stress up here because you never step away from your desk and you're always just in this state of emergency. And then you're pumping something into your body that's like adrenaline, and you're just sitting here actually not moving, just building all that up in your cells. And then you try to sit still and you're like, I can't sit still. Like, I've got too much to do and blah, blah, blah. And these same people are so run down and exhausted, but they can't sit still. And look, I get it. That's exactly what was happening to me. And we
Mhm.
talked about this earlier today. I have the same amount now. I have the same amount of caffeine every day. I didn't give up caffeine. I was like, one thing at a time here. Let's start with energy drinks. That'll be the bulk of my caffeine. I'll just have coffee in the morning. So I have like a venti blonde from Starbucks, or I make like a French press at home. But Sundays I don't work out, and I have a lot more downtime where I'm like chilling. We usually I'll go get coffee and we'll sit and watch church. And like I've noticed for the last few weeks, I'm so like I like found myself keep having to remind myself, relax, like relax, relax during church because I feel so antsy and I want to keep moving and I want to like play with my hair or mess with my sweatshirt or like twirl this in a circle, or like I need to just be doing something because I feel so hyperactive. And then I have this sense of like, I can't do anything with this energy. So then I just feel really internally restless. And I think that it's something, even though I've worked so hard on this habit, there's still a part of me that's like, yeah, but like you have caffeine every day and it's not always a problem. But it's like, yeah, but the context of Sunday is different. And it's good for you to be aware of how this is actually affecting your body. Because my suspicion is normally I have caffeine and then I start writing my book and it kind of helps me. I am more in that creative flow where my mind is moving a little faster. And then I have breakfast and jump straight into work. And that sense of like energy seems to help me stay productive. But I'm still probably really tense and there's still a disconnection from my body when I'm in that state. But I think I don't really notice it until I'm in a situation like today where I don't really have anything to focus on enough that I can really disconnect from how anxious my body feels.
Yeah, I'm so happy you spoke to that just because there is so much that you spoke to about how when things are normalized or you've lived a certain pattern for so long, the things that seem obvious aren't actually. Where some individuals, me for example, is a good example when I was struggling with having blurry vision and my body was a little bit more fatigued and I wasn't understanding why. So I would drink caffeine as if that was going to fix the problem of my low energy when really all it was doing was causing my stressed out nervous system that was causing the blurred vision and the need for rest to exacerbate all of my symptoms and left me on literally laying down, right? Same thing where it's just not so obvious when we're in the middle of something that's either normalized or been a part of our patterns for so long. So I think you speaking to that might be an aha for multiple individuals who didn't even think about connecting taking in caffeine to reducing anxiety because you spoke to your own where you were anxious after Florida and the thing you did was to de-stress was to go get an energy drink. Like that connection just sometimes it isn't there. And so having to work through that process of having something and sitting with it, like you're saying, actually understanding what it's doing to your body or your overall state of existence is so critical in the process of change. Because if you're not connecting to what it's actually making you feel, where you have the actual truth in front of you, the reality of the situation of what an energy drink intake is actually doing, you're not able to wholly accept the truth. Like you're saying, that radical honesty piece isn't actually capable of coming to fruition. So, you speaking to that, I think, was huge just because that piece is where I feel myself included has been lacking once I was able to tap into the self awareness piece and really that interoception of what something was doing to my physical state of being. It helped me completely change because I no longer wanted to be putting myself in that position, just like you're saying, you no longer wanted to put yourself in that situation.
Definitely. And as a side note, coming from a fitness coach, because I can't ever turn off this side of my brain, I think one thing that I did was justify it because I thought that it would increase my metabolism and I thought that it would prevent me from eating more food. but I have consistently seen in clients that my clients who have the healthiest relationship with caffeine tend to have the least instances of overeating. Now, that's not causation, that's correlation. There could be some addictive tendencies that play into someone being both like tending towards having like binging behavior and tending to overdo caffeine. But again, those with a balanced relationship with caffeine tend to have better behaviors around food and they tend to be way more connected to their body. And one thing that we don't think about is caffeine puts us in that fight or flight state, and the way that we can calm ourselves and bring our nervous system back down into like a more regulated parasympathetic state is by eating. So a lot of times we drink the caffeine and then we can kind of justify it like, this is increasing my metabolism and I'm just going to replace a snack with this caffeine and that's better because it's fewer calories. I find that so often people who do that, they end up overeating later because they're using it as a way to calm themselves down because they've pushed
Mm,
themselves into this state of hyperstimulation and they don't know how to regulate and bring themselves down anymore. And because this substance, usually something like an energy drink, is so potent, it's almost impossible to just bring it down by like sitting down and resting for a minute. You almost have to have like another substance to like counteract it, like some carbs to bring your cortisol down.
yeah, like that's just a cool insight for anyone who is wanting to take on a similar journey or can relate to you in that way. Amazing.
Definitely.
Do you have
So
anything else you want to share on the journey, on your journey at all? Any like tips for people who are falling back in to repeated patterns of behavior? Just like if you're falling back into a pattern, this is the one thing that you would advise them.
yeah, I mean that's what happened to me multiple times, and I think I'm not saying I'll never have an energy drink again. You know, I'm not. I haven't committed to that. I told myself 90 days, I'm going to reevaluate at that point. But I think it's important that you have checks and balances with yourself long term. And if you're not creating awareness, you will start to justify things again. So for myself, having like a daily check-in process where I log all my caffeinated drinks. So at least I kind of notice how much I'm having. That seems to help me a lot. And I also have a digestion log. And since that's something it affects, as well as a mental state log. So those things that I know it affects, because I'm creating awareness around that, I have to be very honest with myself about patterns. And I look back at my week of data and kind of see, all right, what's my resting heart rate? And how was my anxiety this week? How was my digestion? Oh, I had acid reflux 5 days this week and I drank an Alani New every single day. All right, got to pull them out again. Like you have to create that objectivity because that subjective like emotion of, guilt or like just pure desire for something, it's just not, those aren't reliable enough. So getting out of your body sometimes and into your head, at least enough to kind of come out of the emotion and then really connecting with what is my overall goal here. I want to feel a stable sense of energy. Like one of my words is vitality. I want to feel a sense of vitality. To be honest, when I'm on energy drinks, I don't really feel a sense of vitality. So I have to make sure I'm checking in with myself daily and weekly and making sure that all my behaviors are aligning with the feelings and the kind of person that I want to be. And if I notice something that is pulling me away from those things, then I very objectively just have to be like, awesome, this is the one thing I'm going to focus on this week. So if it's something that you don't want to necessarily quit, but you want to create more balance around, then you need to have some kind of review process with yourself every day. And that is, I think, one of the most effective ways to stay in the maintenance phase long term and to manage recurrences without it being like a full like relapse, so to speak. More like okay, I've had energy drinks 3 times this week and my anxiety has been actually a lot higher than previously. So I know maybe this week I'll cut it down to one and see. So like start to set rules with yourself and then hold your commitments and build confidence out of those small weekly commitments.
That's awesome. I think one thing I just want to add real quick, if you don't mind, because it came to me last minute, but I think talking about your frustration and that fascination piece again, what I have come to realize or notice, and as well as clients that I've had, when they switch from frustration to fascination in this whole process, it takes them out of that fight or flight and back into that green space again. When you can't rationally think in fight or flight, you're just in survival mode. So those parts of you that are acting out in survival mode and fight or flight, like you're saying with caffeine and what that does to the nervous system at times, when you start to get frustrated, the same kind of response happens and you can't actually bring in that radical honesty piece that you're speaking to. So once you're in that place of, okay, I've had 3 energy drinks this week and I see my anxiety getting higher, just get fascinated with that. Otherwise, getting into that fight or flight, all of a sudden, you're not bringing in that ability to have radical honesty and that objectivity that you're speaking to of actually creating change around it. So obviously understanding, we've talked about this in previous episodes, our parts are going to come up, but they're all just trying to protect us. The only thing that all of our parts are trying to do is survive, help us to survive. And we have to take the parts of us that are meant for thriving and help them be the ones that are driving the ship over the parts of us that show up just out of protection. So bringing in a little bit more about what we've talked about into this as well, I think adding these things from our episodes together, all coming into one block here of really bringing about true behavior change and that ending up being something that actually transforms the lives of others.
Definitely. So we actually want to turn it over to you guys now. We're going to wrap up our series on behavior change before we move to the next topic, which we will announce next week. So I'm going to be posting a Q&A on my Instagram story. I'll have my link to my Instagram in the bio below, so you can refer to that. Be sure also to like and subscribe to support the channel. But I'm going to be asking you guys, like, what is a behavior that you're wanting to change, or maybe what is a new behavior that you're wanting to incorporate? And then we're going to take your little case studies and bring them onto the podcast and kind of walk through some basic steps of how to get started and the next steps to take. So be sure to look out for that Q&A on both of our stories and respond. We'll be gathering questions, picking the best ones to go over on the podcast next week. So really looking forward to hearing what you guys are really like striving to improve in your own lives, and hopefully give you some tangible advice as to how to move forward into a productive state where you can build that confidence and create lasting behavior change. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching. Catch us next week. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and we will catch you next time.